So if you were to do a search on the internet for pictures of Jesus, it is surprising what you can come up with. We've got Jesus the revolutionary, a kind of a Che Guevara type character on the top left. We've got Jesus the scientist. That was a new one on me, top right. Of course, we've got Jesus the superhero, bottom left. And this character on the bottom right, I'm not quite sure. Is this a kind of a blogger type, Jesus the blogger? Something like that. I'm not quite sure. And it does raise the question, where do we go to get an honest and a clear sight of Jesus? And of course, as ever, it is the Bible that comes to the rescue. The clearest sight we can get of Jesus is in the Scriptures. And of course, the Gospels play an important part of that. So here we go, a clear sight of Jesus this morning. Well, over the last few weeks, we have been learning a lot about Jesus from these chapters. And Matt helpfully showed us that whereas in chapters 5 to 7, Jesus is very much the kind of the teaching authority. He has authority in his teaching, the famous Sermon on the Mount. The chapters that follow, 8 and 9 and so on, demonstrate that he was also a man of effective action, showing his authority over disease. There's a number of healing miracles in chapter 8, over those who follow him, and even last week over the forces of nature. Look at that heading just there, verse 23, Jesus calming the storm. And it all helps us to get a clear sight of Jesus. And right from the very beginning, we can see that that's in such contrast to many of the ideas that our world have about Jesus. He's not just somebody with a few good ideas. He's not just somebody who might kind of help you emotionally or psychologically or even some vague spiritual benefit. But rather he's someone with real authority, someone who we should take seriously, ultimately someone powerful and effective who we can trust. And as I've been thinking about this passage this week, I think really that's been my prayer for myself. It's been my prayer for all of us that we find our faith in Jesus fed as we look at these verses. That we are reminded that he is someone to be taken seriously. He's powerful. He's effective. He's someone we should listen to. He's someone ultimately that we should trust. And it is a very short passage that we've looked at this morning, just these verses 28 to 34. But it kind of fits with that kind of trajectory that I've just described, because here is Jesus showing his authority in another area, not only in healing or in the forces of nature, but now even over the shadowy realm of evil. So these verses fit in with that theme, but they also fit in with this theme about kind of trying to find a good sight of Jesus. Because as we read this passage, we realize that some people, when they're confronted by Jesus, they still fail to see him for whom he really is. And they fail to trust him. So look, I'm going to read the verses again. And as I do so, just look for those two things. We see something about the power of Jesus and how it's demonstrated, but also look at how people respond to his power. Let me read those verses again from verse 28 and following. When Jesus arrived at the other side of the region of the Gadarenes, 2 demon-possessed men coming from the tombs met him. They were so violent that no one could pass that way. "What do you want with us, Son of God?" they shouted. "Have you come here to torture us before the appointed time?" Some distance from them, a large herd of pigs was feeding. The demons begged Jesus, "If you drive us out, send us into the herd of pigs." He said to them, "Go." So they came out and went into the pigs, and the whole herd rushed down the steep bank into the lake and died in the water. Those tending the pigs ran off, went into the town and reported all this, including what had happened to the demon-possessed men. Then the whole town went out to meet Jesus. And when they saw him, they pleaded with him to leave their region. Well, even with just a couple of readings through these verses, You can see that they are, as we put on the screen there, seeking to help us to get a clear sight of Jesus. And it is his power and it is his authority over these shadowy forces of evil, the evilness there, that kind of stands out. And we see his strength in the way that he deals with these dark powers. And we see something of their strength by the impact that they've had, firstly, on these two men, these two demon-possessed men. Notice that they've kind of created a kind of a no-go zone because of their violence. And then also that the kind of the force of these evil powers is demonstrated by the impact that they have on the large herd of pigs. So when they're kind of cast out into the pigs, what happens? The pigs run straight down the bank into the lake and are drowned. So you just get some idea there by the behavior of these men and the behavior of their pigs, just how terrible and forceful these dark powers were. And so therefore we see something of Jesus' strength when he casts the dark forces out, and he does it with just one word, go. And then we see that the effect that this has on the men. It's so dramatic, the change in their lives, that it's something that people reported on when they went back to the town. It's something they wanted to share with others. See, again, this is telling us Jesus is not a kind of a soft touch individual, not just, well, he's just kind of one teacher from history amongst many. He's somebody, a character from the past. We can just kind of stand back and coolly appraise him. He's a force to be reckoned with. And if we kind of expand on that a little bit, I think we can see, firstly, we see something of Jesus here as the present and future judge. Now, I say that because of the words that the demons use. Look at the words that they use. They're speaking through these troubled men, and they call Jesus the Son of God. What do you want with us, Son of God? Last Sunday, Matt pointed out that Jesus uses the title Son of Man for the first time in Matthew 8. Here, we have the reference to Jesus being the Son of God the first time in Matthew chapter 8. And it's a significant title. It is what we might call a messianic title. It's acknowledging Jesus as God's anointed one. And part of his mission as the Messiah, as the anointed one, is to judge God's enemies. And the demons see him in this way. And they ask Jesus, have you come to torture us before the appointed time? That's a very strange thing to do, isn't it? To say, have you come to torture us before the appointed time? See, they have this understanding that there will come a day when Jesus will judge them. Their power will be removed from them, and the kind of things that they've done to others will be done to them. So here at that time, they're kind of torturing these poor men. The day will come when the demons themselves will be tortured. There is a day ahead, an appointed time, when Jesus will come and judge all the powers of evil. But here he is exercising that authority as a judge there and then in that day, demonstrating to all that he has authority as a judge, not just in the future, but also in the present. He's the one before whom we stand now and will also have to face then. He's the one before whom we stand now and will one day have to face then. So in getting a clear picture of Jesus, we have to note that he is the present and future judge. But the second thing we see about Jesus is this in this passage. He's also the present and future deliverer. So these two troubled men are released. They're delivered from this demonic bondage. And suddenly that kind of violent no-go zone that they've created becomes a place of peace. And the town that they bothered and troubled is now rid of unclean spirits, and we might say unclean animals. And note how this has happened. Jesus has not been invited into this area. He's taken the initiative to go there. It's not the kind of area we would have expected him to visit. It was a Gentile area, hence the pigs being there and so on. But he's not restricted by borders. Neither is he inhibited when he gets there. He's able to deliver the sufferers there, just as he had been able to do it elsewhere. He is a present deliverer, acting there to free people up from terrible bondage. But when we look across the pages of the Bible, we see him as the future deliverer, bringing a greater peace. The kind of peace he brought to those men, bringing to hundreds, thousands, millions of others. We need a Jesus like this in our world. There are many no-go zones in our world. We know that, don't we? Places that are wrecked by destruction. Lives that are wrecked by disease. Communities wrecked by displacement. Families wrecked by dysfunction. Places which we are prone to ignore when we think about our condition as human beings. God could be excused for seeing all of us as one big no-go zone. I don't want to go there. I don't want to go in that place with all that mess. And yet here is Jesus, the very Son of God, visiting unannounced and bringing effective and decisive deliverance. If we're going to get a clear sight of Jesus from these verses, he's not only the present and future judge, but also the present and future deliverer. We get a clear sight of Jesus as both judge and deliverer. And I hope that both sides, we might say, of Jesus are coming through to you from this passage this morning. It's very important. I know it seems like a very short part of the Bible. It is actually less than 10 verses. And Jesus only says one word in all these 10 verses. But you know what it's like if you visit a castle and they've got those little slit windows and you go up to that window. It may only be a small window, but as you look out, you can see the whole wide landscape. When we look at Jesus simply through these few verses, we see a wide landscape. He is the present and future judge. He is the present and future deliverer. We see both sides of Christ, even through this little window. The question then is, how do we respond to what we see? Will we, as it were, go with this clear sight of Christ? Will we accept him? Or will we do what the people here did and refuse him? It really is quite bizarre the way that they behave at the end. Think about this. If you were to read many other stories in the gospel where Jesus does a great miracle delivering somebody from paralysis or other kind of issues, what usually happens is this. The people beg him to stay longer, and they hurry and bring more people for him to bless and touch and heal. Look how different this is. Verse 34. Then the whole town went out to meet Jesus and said, "Don't go away. We're going to bring lots more people to you." No. They pleaded with him, "Leave this place." It's the same word that the demons used when they pleaded with him to send them into the pigs. Not only did Jesus make the demons feel uncomfortable, he had the same effect on the people of the town. How about us? How are we going to respond to the clear sight of Jesus they had and we have through this record? Are we going to go along with it? Are we going to go along with the clear sight of Jesus as both judge and deliverer? When we see these two sides of his character, what is our reaction? One man summed up the conflict that we have like this. The difference is in the knowledge of God's power or his goodness. Knowledge of his power instills fear, scares men from his sights, and thrusts him away. Whereas knowledge of his goodness induces men to decide that nothing would be more desirable than to be united with him. You see, it's that. What are we seeing here? Are we seeing his power? Are we seeing his goodness? How do we deal with this? Well, here's a slightly easier way of looking at it. C.S. Lewis in the Narnia stories has the children ask a question about Aslan the lion, a picture of Jesus. Is he safe? They ask. No, he is not safe, but he is good. I wonder if you've discovered something of that for yourself. Are you seeing both sides of Jesus? I think in many ways that's a battle that we have to kind of come to terms with every day. We have to recognize that Jesus is not safe. He is the present judge. He will upset our lives. He will call us out. He will heighten our conscience. He will urge us to change. He is not safe, but he is good. Any challenges he brings are for our blessing. When he raises questions about our use of time, money, energy, our bodies, it may be painful, but will always be for our good because he is good. He desires to do us good. He is the present and future deliverer. Are we going to go along with him, submitting to his present judgment, recognizing our need of his ongoing deliverance? I think day by day we struggle with the true clear sight of Jesus in this way. Two sides of Jesus. We need to see them, as it were, two ends of the seesaw. Both have to be there if we're going to have a clear sight of Jesus. Of course, we see both of those sides so clearly at the cross. He achieves a just deliverance, judging our sin in and through Jesus and bringing us deliverance that only he can. We're going to celebrate that a little bit later on as we come round the communion table. Do we see this judgment and deliverance? It's interesting, if you look back in church history, you can see that there were times when the church really recognized both of these elements. Jesus was the judge. He was calling out that which was wrong. He was the deliverer. He was bringing change. Some of us may know that about 150 to 200 years ago, there was a group of evangelical Christians in South London called the Clapham Five. And they saw lots wrong in their society. And they worked hard. They saw that Jesus was, as it were, through them calling out many things that were wrong in society. They wanted to bring change. They wanted to bring deliverance. So they worked on prison reform. They stopped the press gang culture of recruiting for the Navy. They cared for the mentally ill. They brought regulations about boys climbing up chimneys, the early acts of health and safety. They encouraged education to all. They were, as it were, acting as the present judge and also the present deliverer. Jesus calling out both of those things. What about in the life of the local church? Haven't we seen over the last few years the church calling out church leaders who have misused their power? Why? Because Jesus is a present and future judge, wanting to bring present and future deliverance. Have we seen this in our personal lives, where there's been things that we need to confess, changes that need to come about, demonstrating to those around us these two sides of Jesus? And of course, that's the message that our world needs to hear. If the Bible is concerned with us getting a clear sight of Jesus and going along with that clear sight of Jesus, it also wants us to be giving a clear sight of Jesus to others. Think back to those rather crazy pictures that I showed you. If you scan if you search the internet for pictures of Jesus, you'll realize just how weird and strange many of the ideas people have in our world about Jesus. And that's true for many of our friends and family as well. It's the Bible that gives us a clear picture. And as someone said, the church is to be the Bible to the world. We are the ones who can give the world a clear sight of Jesus, making it clear to others that he is a judge, but he's also a deliverer, bringing clarity where there's confusion, even in our family, our friends, our neighbours and work colleagues.